Hello, today I will talk about Conquer Catharsis, a virtual reality biofeedback relaxation game for Oculus Rift and HTC Vive. My name is Andreas Lenz. I'm a graduate of the University of Vienna and a game designer for Purple Lamp Studios. This paper is a more condensed version of my bachelor's thesis, which accompanied the creation of the game. The thesis was supervised by Dr. Helmut Klavatsch in cooperation with Dr. Oswald Kottgassner and Dr. Anna Fehlenhofer from the Medical University of Vienna. First off, let's talk about some of the goals we had in mind for the project and the various stakeholders. My main goal was to design an accessible gameplay and create a beautiful, realistic-looking environment to see how far we could push the limits of the hardware. I worked together with two psychologists from the Medical University of Vienna, Dr. Anna Fehlenhofer and Dr. Oswald Kottgassner, who were the main source of knowledge on the most important stakeholders, which are the children who would be using the game. Their goals were to have a biofeedback-driven VR game that was easy to configure and could collect data on the patients playing it. There were also several technical must-haves that we will talk about later. Let's take a quick look at some of the related work. This project is based on a master's thesis project from 2017 by Max Ellmeier, which was also supervised by Dr. Helmut Klavatsch. That project also used the same heart rate monitor technology and performed similar studies. Conquer Catharsis uses the learnings from this project and takes it one step further with a much larger scope. The game has over an hour of gameplay and much higher visual fidelity. We'll see later if this pays off. Biofeedback in VR and games is nothing new. It has been used in all manner of applications such as entertainment. Alien Isolation, for example, supports attaching a heart rate monitor to make the alien adapt to your anxiety levels. PTSD training simulations use biofeedback in VR to help patients through exposure therapy. And a recent trend, for example, has seen many VR meditation games appear on the market that sometimes support the use of additional hardware to measure biosignals and enhance gameplay. The core gameplay consists of alternating between exploration with free play and guided relaxation at the so-called relaxation events. These are fixed points in the world where the player can enter and start a relaxation challenge. Free play and exploration is designed to create states of high arousal, while relaxation events require concentration and introspection. These are built to be more secluded, with a singular goal to focus on. Usually the surroundings become slightly darker, and there is only one salient visual cue in the player's field of view. At relaxation events, the glowing points in the first picture, the player's heart rate is actively monitored and the game world reacts to give feedback on the change of the heart rate. In the second picture, we can see how movement is accomplished with typical motion controller beams. This is a common mechanism in VR applications. And additionally, the player can pick up items and interact with physically simulated plants. Let's take a look at how such a relaxation event works. The supervisor, in our case the psychologist, would configure starting values for the player, and then when the player is ready, they would start the game. When entering a relaxation event, the game would use these values together with the current heart rate to adapt the game world. The important values here are the base heart rate. This is taken as the upper limit. If the player is at this heart rate or above, the world state is not changed at all. So in this case, the forest would stay completely barren. The lower limit is the threshold. When the player is at this heart rate or below, the world state is fully changed. Between those values, we linearly interpolate change. Every event in the game needed to be designed to work with continuous change because we felt change in discrete steps gave less immediate feedback. If the player's heart rate stays below the threshold for a certain duration, then the world state changes permanently. Let's take a look. So first we can see here that the heart rate is far above the baseline, and if the player starts relaxing now, then it moves to somewhere in the middle and the forest becomes kind of brown and the leaves come back a little bit. And if the player relaxes even further, the forest turns completely green. If they stay at this heart rate for a few seconds now, then the world state becomes permanent. The level design follows a linear structure with a few smaller detours for exploration that always lead back to the main path. The player starts on the beach, which we can see in the bottom right corner, where they have a first chance to acclimate to the environment and the controls. From there, we guide them through their first relaxation event where the player makes the fog dissipate and the forest bloom again. The red lines denote the optimal path through the island, with green lines showing where the large distance is covered by using a teleporter. It was very important to me to fit all the events naturally into one level and have most of the island visible at any given time. This required building custom solutions for distance LOD meshes and level streaming to reduce GPU load. Now that we've talked extensively about the game world and how you interact with it, I'm going to show you a short video highlighting some of the most beautiful spots, and then we'll talk about how I went about creating it. The game was built in Unreal Engine 4 using mainly free assets from a wide range of sources. Due to the tight restrictions on rendering load in VR, heavy optimizations to the models were needed. Also, the wide range of different asset packs needed to be brought together to be somewhat consistent with one another. For this, the models were run through some automated steps that combined and reduced textures, reduced polygon count, and created very aggressive LODs. For faraway objects, I combined entire sections of the level into large meshes that could then be streamed in and out and replaced as the player got closer. At this time, the HLOD system of Unreal Engine, which is an automated process for doing this, was not very reliable because I was using a custom engine version that had integrated some external libraries that sped up VR rendering. A companion app was built with which the game could be controlled and measurement parameters such as baseline and activation threshold could be calibrated and monitored. The way this works is that the game runs a TCP server that receives data from the companion app on a mobile device. This can be any Android-capable device such as a tablet or a phone. The companion app connects to the heart rate sensor via Bluetooth and sends that data to the game through the local Wi-Fi network. This approach proved robust where the machine running the game did not have Bluetooth, which is common on many standalone machines. Also, it gave the assisting person a lightweight handheld option as opposed to being planted in front of a stationary monitor. Creating a forest island came from personal taste. I like the idea of having an island with a mountain and a large body of water. This could have also been a lake. Also, this has the advantage of creating a natural barrier to the play space. The high-level plan was to have a tier system where the player could clearly see how far they had moved up the mountain. I wanted strong visual cues and large silhouettes to guide the player through the island. You can see these by the large structures that are on the island and that you always have clear views of things such as the ruins or the tips of the mountains or where the forest is. At the top we can see some early sketches of the blockouts, and at the bottom we have a view of the starting point of the island in the final version. So at the end I conducted a small study using the iGroup Presence Questionnaire, short IPQ, as a basis. This was the same study that was also conducted, or the same study basis that was conducted by a virtual relaxing forest in 2017, and I'll be using that as a comparison to the results from Conquer Catharsis. So I had 20 people range with the age between 20 and 35 with various degrees of experience in VR. We each given about 15 minutes each to play and then filled out the questionnaire. So the questionnaire itself is split into three categories, which are spatial presence, which is the sense of being physically present in the virtual environment, then involvement, which is how strongly the player feels involved with the environment, and experience realism, which measures the subjective experience of realism in the virtual environment. So, in conclusion, the players had a strong sense of spatial presence, which I attribute mainly to the good tracking capabilities of the HTC Vive and the high frame rates we achieved, even though most people were still bothered by the cables of the device, which I think will be a problem for a while. So, when compared to the results of the same study of the predecessor thesis from 2017, I found that interaction and consistency are more important than visual photorealism for spatial presence, based on the fact that the visual fidelity was vastly different, but the spatial tracking tools were roughly the same. And because the scores on spatial presence were also the same. Deeper analysis of the experienced realism category showed that most of the users didn't actually find the setting realistic, but they experienced the place to be realistic. And this is interesting because the questionnaire directly actually tests, or the questions test, if the player perceives it perceives the place to be realistic when compared to the real world. And this is a bit tricky for virtual worlds, of course, because it can't be compared to the real world in many cases. So it's more that the actual place itself needs to be tested if it's realistic. So in a way, I would say that the IPQ may even be more suited to things such as virtual house viewings, but not especially fantasy places. In the end, we would conclude that people can experience a fantasy ruin to be just as realistic and feel just as present in the space while knowing that that space doesn't actually exist anywhere in the real world. So thank you for your time, and I think now we'll have time for questions.